All right, welcome to Crypto. Here it's me, Hugh. Dennis is here, as always, on a Tuesday. We got a great crowd tonight. Why? Because we've got Ivan in the house, all the way from Sweden.
Good to be here.
Great to have you here, and we're going to get into a huge conversation on, on Ivan and crypto. And but first of all, I just want to ask, what brings you to Toronto?
Yeah, what brings you to our village?
Right.
I will disappoint you right away. The Vitalik is not here. We have his mother here, but he's gone.
But both his mother and his father are very involved, right?
Yeah, they're in Toronto. Yeah.
No, so we're here because we have the small North America tour. So we're in Toronto and then we go to San Francisco. And originally we were supposed to be at the press conference with Warren Buffett and Justin Sun. But that got cancelled yesterday because Justin Sun has health issues, according to the official story.
And so why did you pick Toronto?
Because I've never been to Canada before.
Okay.
So I thought it was a good opportunity.
But you picked Toronto over Montreal, over
Yeah,
Vancouver?
because we searched for like the biggest city
Crypto?
to go, not just the biggest city to go.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was Toronto.
Great.
So just leisure.
Yeah, not only leisure, mostly business actually. So we met with a lot of projects already. For example, today went with Deloitte here in Toronto, and I always try to combine traveling with business. So it's productive because it's not often you go to Toronto.
Well, it's productive, but it's also fun to be actually working in the culture when you go somewhere. Right?
Yes.
And just be a tourist and go to the restaurants. It's nice to be actually doing something
Exactly.
meaningful, right? So it's great. Yeah. So, Dennis, I don't know, where do we go from here?
An announcement for the next week. We're gonna have a Blockstack Meetup in here. So the Ken from Blockstack's Toronto office will be presenting, and we're gonna have a video call with the developer from Blockstack. And Blockstack, they building decentralized internet. They have a completely different philosophy actually from Ethereum. Ethereum has everything on chain. Blockstack only keeps the identity and the smart contract logic on chain, and the applications are hosted elsewhere. So basically, the user decides where to keep the user information and run the applications, similar to, I assume, like a BitTorrent or something. So that's they have a fund of, right now they're distributing around $200,000 a month, and this will go up to $1 million per month among developers. So if you want to know, if you're developers, just next Tuesday, 7 p.m., exactly here.
Okay, great. And so we're going to have a pretty great conversation. I'm not sure what direction we're going to go tonight, but we've got a microphone in the audience. So if you want to interact, just put your hand up, and we'll bring a mic over so we can hear your questions. You won't be on camera, maybe the back of your head, but you don't have to worry about that.
So I prepared a little research and a presentation. If you have anything to add, free. And let's talk about crypto exchange hacks and how they happened and what you need to know in order not to lose your money. So first of all, the cryptocurrencies are a completely different paradigm from banking. So you are responsible for security of your crypto. While in banking, banks take care of the security of your money, they can reverse transactions, so you don't need to care about anything. You lose your credit card, you show up in the bank, they give you a new one. They even reverse transactions. With crypto, there's nowhere you can show up. There's no way you can recover your password. If you lost your password, the money is gone. You can see them on the blockchain. There's no way you can spend them. So the same thing with crypto exchanges. They have a different paradigm. So they trade actually with the assets that you're trading. With traditional assets, it doesn't happen this way. So there's a custodian that keeps the assets that belong to your name, and that's the same thing as with banking. And so that there are three different risks types of risks from exchanges. The exchange side attacks. first of all, exchange side attacks, the second user side attacks, and then I call them like other risks, which we'll talk later. So this is what I found. Usually how exchanges getting hacked. The first one is the most common, the hot wallet. So the difference between the hot wallet and the cold wallet is that the hot wallet doesn't need the human interaction. So it already has the private key inside. The software can sign all the transactions. So that's why if the software is compromised, so it can easily send all the coins out of the wallet, which happened with Binance. So those guys have like almost, I think, the best security. They're the largest exchange. They're pretty open about it. And the hackers, they emptied the entire wallet. Whatever was in the hot wallet, they stole it. And another attacks that's the exchanges experience that's called the phishing attack, or spear phishing, because they're targeting only employees of the exchange. So what happens, they just send emails, then the employee opens the emails, clicks on the link, download the malware, and then their system is compromised, so then the attacker is controlling the employee's computer. And that can be the keylogger or whatnot. I'm not familiar with the details. Then the DDoS attacks. So with the first two attacks, they can actually steal the cryptocurrency. With DDoS attacks, it's they can only mess with the exchange service, and that can create fiat in the market, like fear and uncertainty. And usually when this happens, the exchange goes offline, no one knows what's going on, people trying to get out of there, they sell their coins, the price drops. So a few examples. So in 2013, the Mt. Gox experienced this kind of attack, and Bitcoin dropped from $100 to $55. So to 2017, it was with Bitfinex, Neo, OMG, and ETP dropped like almost 90% on those exchanges. And the transaction malleability attack. So I'm not really technical. Maybe you can actually chime in. And I don't even know if this is the valid attack at the moment. But this is what happened with the Mt. Gox in 2014, where the attacker was swapping the transactions ID before they got confirmed on the Bitcoin blockchain. I don't know if it's still
right, but this was mainly fixed by SegWit.
Yeah, so that's,
one of the updates was transaction malleability, and it also allows for easier deployment of Lightning Network. So it's both, as you say, to make sure that when you create a transaction, it's impossible to change the ID. And the way they change it is because you can create the signature in two different ways. Those two different ways are both valid, but and they basically say that this transaction is signed by the user, it is signed by the sender, it will be accepted by the blockchain, but you can actually format it in two different ways. And that will give the transaction a different ID, because the ID is actually based on the byte representation of the transaction. So that is what was fixed, and this is why SegWit is important as well.
Except I don't know any exchanges that use SegWit right now.
SegWit is getting more and more adopted, but I'm not sure exactly which ones use it. But they're very slow with adopting it. It is true, and one of the biggest reasons is because there is just so much infrastructural change that needs to happen. But it's been a year. It's been a year already, more than a year.
So recent hot wallet attacks, for example, in 2018, the biggest one was the CoinCheck, the Japanese exchange, where attackers stole $500 million worth of NEM. Binance was hacked in May, 40 million in Bitcoin, so 7,000 Bitcoins. So altogether, through the entire history, attackers stole 1.5 billion, around that number, and only in 2018 it was like around 1 billion. And that's because the price of cryptocurrencies goes up, and then every year we will see this number getting higher and higher. And that's why something needs to be done. So somehow exchanges should be separated from funds. DEXs, I don't know if it's a good solution. Maybe we can talk about it a little later. And okay, so this the user side attacks. What we have here is email compromise and password recovery. So if you have an account on an exchange, so the attackers cannot hack your password on an exchange, but all of a sudden your email has a weak password, or for whatever reason your email is compromised. Someone found your phone with an open email, so the attacker can start the recovery process of your exchange account through your email. Weak or reusable passwords, for example. Some passwords are so easy to brute force, so it takes like half a second for that normal laptop. And sometimes people just reuse their password. I mean 100% of the times. So if you're when you log in different services which you use maybe once, and their security is so poor, but you use the same password, someone hacks it, and then just goes through all your emails and exchange accounts. So phishing is another one where you receive an email, click on the link, download the malware, and it can be keylogger, it can be anything else, but it reads, well, basically your computer is compromised. There are a bunch of different ways from there. Another popular one is the website spoofing. So when you go, you try to log in on Binance, but you mistype one letter. You land on the website that looks exactly like Binance, and you believe it's Binance, and then you type in all your credentials, even if you use the two-factor authentication. So you type it in, and attackers will log into the original Binance website with your credentials and with your two-factor authentication. And a lot of users don't even use two-factor authentication. This is how your account can get compromised. Any questions?
Questions or comments? Just put your hand up, please.
No. And my favorite other risks, the exit scams. Especially, we're very lucky in Canada. We have Quadriga here, and a couple of smaller exchanges that just Maple.
Are those
exchange.
exit scams? Is that what an exit scam is?
Yeah, so those guys, they were exiting the exchange for a year before completely disappearing.
He died.
Using quotation marks.
Officially, yeah. Well, but it started way before he died. So. And also there are regulatory risks. So basically, if you use Coinbase, for example, it's a very secure exchange, very reputable. However, United States decide to block all the crypto transactions, and then you're stuck.
And there's a law before Congress, right? They want to ban Americans from owning crypto. Good idea.
Yeah. We don't know. That's just a risk. So, how do you choose the secure exchange? What do you need to look at? So first, you look at the location where the exchange is located. Sometimes it's obvious. You can read about it on their website. Sometimes it's not obvious. Like, I'm not familiar with HIT BTC. No one knows where they are.
But even with BitMax, you know that it's Seychelles, and that location may not be the most reputable one that you trust.
Yeah.
But you don't have a lot of choices, because if you want to do 100x, as many people want to do, you have to use Bybit or BitMax.
Well, I mean, at least you should assess this information.
Yes.
So yeah, they're in Seychelles. The headquarters are in Hong Kong. So will you be able to get your money out of there, like as a law enforcement?
Or rising ocean levels.
But But it was also interesting. In 2013, 12, 14, people were basically choosing between Bitstamp and Mt. Gox. And I think Bitstamp is in Slovenia or something.
Yeah.
So many people thought, and this is actually what the founder of BitMax told in a speech as well, that he thought that Japan, where Mt. Gox was, sounded more legit than Slovenia. So therefore he picked Mt. Gox and lost everything there. So location is very tricky as well.
He didn't realize that Mount Gox was really an old 386 in somebody's closet.
Well, it's the location and also the reputation. Like, do they have a team in Japan? Do they have a company in Japan? Is it regulated? Is it the real address or just a what's the PO?
Postbox.
Postbox, yeah. So, but ideally, you want an exchange in your own country. Well, especially if you want to start with fiat, there's no other way. So in Canada, it's pretty bad here. All exchanges are small. And,
So which one? We've heard CoinSquare. Is
Coin-
that in
CoinSquare
Canada?
is probably the biggest one right now, yeah. And we have a bunch of smaller exchanges with low liquidity, obviously.
Mm.
So then you look at the reputation, you look at the company, you look at the team. Is the team known? Like HitBTC, no one knows the team. You don't know what's happening with them. And are they regulated? And Canada just issued the new regulation last week on cryptocurrencies.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, and actually the newer exchanges, they are more compliant with new regulations because the new regulations are coming out. So what was it, Quadriga? It was an older exchange. No one knew who they were, what they were. They were obviously not regulated. So you have to look at this thing. However, it doesn't guarantee that the exchange is going to be safe, but this is one of the points that you need to address. So and then the security, on the security side. So did the exchange experience any hacks? How long it was on the market without any hacks? Like Binance, for example. How do they deal with the hacks? Are they open? Well, this is what I like about Binance, is they go live and they just talk with their customers. So how do they store crypto? How much crypto is in the hot storage? How much crypto in the cold storage? Like BitMax, they claim they don't have any hot wallets at all. So that's why you can only withdraw once a day. So it's not convenient, but it's safe. They will never hack. And also what I'm looking at, if the exchange forces you to implement the security procedures, like 2FA, for example, because it's not really convenient to start learning what 2FA is, downloading new applications, having another backup for that. But Binance enforces you. You won't be able to use Binance without activating the two-factor authentication, and this increases the security of your account like many fold. Well, and other operation security procedures. Also, the KYC probably is a good sign for security because they know who's on the platform, what's going to happen, and if your account gets compromised, probably you will be able to recover it by going through the KYC procedure. However, on the privacy side, like if you connect your name to your crypto, it's not particularly good. But we are talking about the security right now. Does the exchange have insurance, or like Binance has the safety fund to actually cover the losses for their customers? The next thing you want to look at the volume and liquidity. It's not so for the security measures, but are you able to trade on this exchange? Are you able to buy somewhat significant amount of bitcoins that the exchange at the price you want to buy them? So like all of the smaller Canadian exchanges, it's really difficult to buy anything like more than 1,000 or 2,000 Canadian dollars on the exchange. Well, do they have customer support? Well, you can check the customer support even before you sign up. it's quite easy how fast they respond, how many languages they support. So it shows how much money they have and how much money they can spend on their security. And also you might want to look at the fees and rates, because the exchanges they have different the funding fees and trading fees. And also sometimes the Bitcoin exchange rate is maybe different. Like I think the Coinbase is always a little bit higher. This is how they make their profit. And also you just look at the usability of the platform, how convenient, how easy it is to make a mistake. Sometimes that happens, especially if you are new to trading. So if you have anything to add.
Looks good.
And yeah, I checked what BitMax does for the security procedure. So as I mentioned, they don't have hot wallets at all. They use multi-sig wallets, so they require 2 people to sign the transactions, all the transactions. And their trading software has this feature of continuous audit. So after every transaction, they look at the sum of all the transactions, and it should add up to 0. If something is missing by like malicious transactions, someone changed the database, or it's just maybe a rounding error, the entire platform just freezes until they figure out what it is. And I also want to mention, just it's actually the general cybersecurity matters. They work for everything in your life, and it's not so easy to protect yourself from like crypto hacking. You need to change your entire behavior online. And it's recommended that you create a separate email to register on exchanges, because if you give this email to everyone, the attackers know which email to hack. But if no one knows the email you use for an exchanges, it's a different story. No one knows what to hack. Do not use your phone as a second factor authentication with SMS, or your phone for any sort of recovery, like email recovery, because the SIM swap is the easiest attack to do at least in Canada and the United States. It can be done over the phone, and it happens every now and then. So the attacker pretends that they tell the support of the telecom that you lost the SIM card, here's the new SIM card, can you activate it? And then they have access to your phone account, and then they can start recover all your emails and all the other accounts. So it's completely not recommended, or it's completely not secure to use your phone number as a recovery mechanism. So always use the strong and unique passwords. And obviously you can't remember a lot of passwords, so you need to use the password manager. You just remember one strong, long password for this password manager, and the password manager will do the job. And obviously, 2-factor authentication, maybe even with the hardware. So Ledger, all these like crypto wallets, they can be used as a second-factor authentication. Other than that, Google Authenticator works fine. There is another one, it's called Authy, which I don't recommend, because Authy has a recovery mechanism through your phone number, which again, if I do the SIM swap, I get you second-factor authentications with Authy. VPN is more for like privacy reasons. However, I guess if the network is compromised, so someone can sniff your traffic and see everything that's happening there. It's recommended that you check your account activity on exchanges and see if there's something wrong, like the logins to your account, or transactions, or some trades that you didn't do. And don't store funds on exchanges longer than you have to. If you don't trade, just move them out. It's much safer to keep them on the hardware world, just like Ledger or anything else. And don't advertise your Bitcoin wealth, as I like Edward Snowden said, as a privacy advocate, I recommend that no one has or says they have cryptocurrencies. So and now the question, like, what we're gonna do? How like right now what's happening is that exchanges keep your funds and then you trade with them, and it's sort of a honeypot. We also have a decentralized exchanges. It's a big topic right now. Binance moving to decentralized exchange. However, we have pros and cons. So in a decentralized exchanges, everyone, like all users, they're responsible for the safety of their crypto, which means there are no honeypots. So the attackers would need to hack everyone, and there's no huge honeypot of $40 million, for example. No exit scams, no regulatory risks, because you are still in control of your crypto all the time. And we have cons that's actually its personal responsibility is pretty heavy for most of the people. That if you understand that you are responsible for your own money and you can lose it, and then the small mistakes can have high price. And it's if you don't follow all the procedures, and right now with this UI and user experience and all these interfaces which are not really friendly, it's easy to just copy your address wrong, and then you lose your money. And also the low liquidity, which leads to higher prices.
So there is an interesting thing to say about the regulatory risk, because most DEXs aren't actually completely decentralized. So most DEXs usually have some centralized parts.
Yeah.
So for example, you could have centralized matching and only decentralized settlement. Or most DEXs, for example, have a website that somebody hosts. And so you look at, for example, EtherDelta. The creator of that got in trouble, and he had to settle with the SEC. So although DEXs are good in theory, in practice, most DEXs are not actually real pure DEXs. Even the Binance DEX is in many ways highly centralized because it runs on the Binance chain. And it's actually interesting why Binance created it. In many ways, in my view, it's just like a test platform for all of these coins. That's, you know what, you can do an IDO, you can do initial decentralized exchange offering. Of course, you have to pay, and then maybe you'll get listed on real Binance.
But I also like their proposal that you can buy a Bitcoin token on the centralized Binance exchange with real Bitcoin, and then the trade this Bitcoin token on the decentralized exchange. Well, it depends on what type of decentralized exchange it is. So with EtherDelta, was it possible to lose your funds? I'm not sure. I don't think so. But
so
Bancor, for example.
Yeah, in most cases you do control your funds. But for example, how do you do order matching? In most cases, the order matching is not done on chain. In most cases, you have like a server matching orders, and then they're settled on chain. You could have, like, there is an exchange called Resistance that we've worked with. They're based in Sweden. So they're trying to do everything on chain, but it's so difficult. It's because of the scalability. You need to have a lot of logic on chain, and once you do that, it becomes very, very burdensome. But yeah, long term, maybe it's possible. But short term, we haven't really seen a lot of adoption yet. And I think in many cases, because people, they don't really think in these terms. The most important things for people right now are liquidity and leverage. You need to have that on your exchange. And that is like 99.99% of the population who uses exchanges right now, what they're looking for.
Yeah, it also depends on who are the users. And right now we have most of the users are just speculators. They just have a goal to become rich fast, and that's why they use centralized exchanges as fast. It's easy to buy and sell. With DEXs, it's probably when you live in countries where you cannot buy cryptos on the centralized exchange where it's banned. So that's how you just find someone in a decentralized manner, and then you buy and sell. It's like BISC.
And also the type of speculators change as well. 2017, 18, we had a lot of coins, new coins. People wanted to increase their Bitcoin wealth by investing in ICOs and buying tokens. And maybe the token will pump, they will sell and get more Bitcoin back. Now it has changed a bit. And once again, it is because BitMax and Bybit, they become so popular. And people now want to more and more increase their Bitcoin wealth by doing leverage. And this is really a trend that we've noticed a lot, my colleagues and I. It really went from, and you look at the numbers, how much money BitMax is making. It's more than Binance. That is why Binance and OKS, now everyone is trying to get into leverage as much as possible because the fees are way higher. Yeah. And leverage is very important for trading, but of course, when you go to 50x, 100x, it's more like a gamble. It's not trading anymore. But people still like that. It's especially you look in Asia, they are not really allowed to gamble, but they're allowed in some cases to use trading, and it becomes more like a gamble to them.
Yeah, but generally, crypto is akin to gambling.
Right,
There's
and then you add
regulations, and then it goes up and down like 10-20% per day, and then you use the 100x leverage.
Exactly. And if you use 100x, it only takes 0.5% in the movement of price against you for you to be liquidated completely. So it is extremely difficult to manage.
Not 1%?
It is 0.5. I'm not sure why it's not 1, because that was my initial reaction as well. But I did research and it is 0.5, at least on BitMax. Maybe it's different on others. So in that sense, it's impossible to manage risk, really. That is a complete gamble.
Well, maybe if you have no other choice.
Right.
Put everything on 0 and see if it works out or not. Yeah, so there are different types of decentralized exchanges. Like I think on Ether Delta, you wouldn't be able to lose your funds. On Bancor, the admins have the ability to freeze your funds, and that's why it's open to regulatory risks, because they can have subpoena from the United States and then you're gonna lose your funds. So yeah, it depends on what's centralized and what's decentralized on those exchanges. Some exchanges are completely decentralized and they're completely user not friendly and very slow, quite expensive.
Yeah, and the ones, for example, Komodo. I think it's a very interesting technology because Komodo actually does cross-chain. So you can do trading from Bitcoin to Litecoin. They use atomic swaps. But practically it's so difficult it's unusable, basically. It is extremely difficult to use.
I haven't tried it, but there's a new one, the Uniswap.
Uniswap is, I think it's on Ether.
Yeah,
it's on Ether, yeah.
It's based on Ether, but it's completely decentralized. So
right.
There's nothing, and it's impossible to shut down.
Yeah.
And as usual, just remember to back up your seed phrase. That's the only way you can recover your coins. And never keep coins on the exchanges. And
it's also important from the fact that exchanges should know that they cannot rely on people having their funds on exchanges all the time. Because then you enter this territory where exchanges start speculating as well. They think, okay, maybe we can get interest on this money. Maybe we can put it to work somewhere else because people are not touching it anyway. And that is why you have this proof of keys tradition. Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Proof of keys is this tradition that Trace Mayer started this year. And so that on January the 3rd, everyone should remove their funds from exchanges. Just once a year to begin with. That we try to spread this tradition. So that exchanges know that, at least once a year, everyone will take a lot of funds out. So, and this is also maybe something that we should have mentioned in the presentation, that, one of the risks is that the exchange doesn't have all the funds. They have gambled, or they have been hacked, or whatever. And it can be that somebody took it from them, or maybe they gambled it away themselves.
Well, yeah, I kind of imagined this in the exit scams. It doesn't have to be an exit scam. It's not necessarily an exit.
And you look at
they can run their business this way.
And you look at Quadriga, what actually has been found, because I think Ernst & Young or PwC, they do investigation into what actually happened. So they traced the funds from the CEO's wallets. He really controlled all the wallets in Quadriga, and it was transferred to his personal accounts on different exchanges, and he had many different accounts on those exchanges, so he used different emails and different identities. Somehow he managed to get a few accounts on each exchange, and he tried to make that money back with leverage and in different ways. But because the market was just going down and he wasn't really good at making it back, it didn't work. So this is also something to definitely keep in mind.
Guys, comments?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Grab the mic.
No, it's okay. I think.
Well, the YouTube won't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. 3 points briefly. Number one, DEXs are very bad user-friendly, and perhaps the Uniswaps or the Air swaps are faster and have higher liquidity. But they're only on Ethereum, so you cannot trade other tokens. So let's see when the interoperability comes. Also on Ethereum, something working on Plasma, it's like when you deposit tokens on Plasma, they give a serial number, an ID to these tokens. So that would be very interesting to see any hack. Oh, you hacked my coins, that's my ID. That really happens. It's one of the Plasma implementations. I don't remember which one. But so many Plasma, but that's one. And lastly, for the centralized exchange, the one that have like you have to send the funds, there's something called Arwin, Arwin.io. Do you guys know about that? Arwin.io, Google that. That's a protocol where they have escrows. They only use Bitcoin, Litecoin, and I don't remember the third one. Which have 3 coins. I don't know. 3 coins only. And then when you send the funds, the exchange doesn't have the funds. It's an escrow contract. So you will never be hacked, even if they have an exchange, and vice versa. Pretty.
How do you spell Arwin?
ARWEN.
.io.
Well, but
Yeah, .io. Check
Okay.
that out. It's pretty amazing. So,
but can they hack the escrow? The custodian?
it's very difficult to hack the escrow.
But you have to trust the escrow now with your fund, right?
But the escrow is a smart contract with a multi-sig. 2 or 3 or 7 or 5 or 7.
I believe the Arwin, their implementation is based off the atomic swap, like
Yes.
nickel and atomic swaps. You should check out James from Sumo One. He did a presentation where he mentioned Arwin, and he went over atomic swaps and some of the problems with them, the call option problem, and also talked about Arwin as well. So I think that's a good resource for finding out more about it.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to say, for I think a lot of decentralized exchanges as well, too many of them people don't realize that they have pause contracts in them, and half the time people are putting their funds into these decentralized exchanges and not realizing at the end of the day that when you're moving their funds, at any time those can be paused, and that's just absolutely insane. But on the subject of atomic swaps, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned a lot of the implementations on there are really difficult to use because there's no proper interface for them. There's a company that's working called Equality, and they're actually working on a implementation of Bitcoin Ethereum that's coming out soon. That'll be the first kind of decentralized exchange with an actual order book that is decentralized. So I'll check that one out because they're coming out with some stuff really soon.
Yeah. We have another question.
Love hardware wallets, but I would say don't let that give you a false sense of security. I was just talking to somebody yesterday who stores his tokens on a ledger, in this case EOS, and there's a lot of phishing scams going on Telegram. People posing as, for example, block producers, mostly helping people with problems they have. So in this case, this person was having a hard time accessing his funds and reached out for help, and somebody posing to be a block producer had him sign a transaction with his ledger, which ended up handing over the authority to his account to this person. So you've got to be very careful about everything you're signing, even with your hardware wallets.
Well, I mean that's the different paradigm. So you need to understand that.
Right.
So the hardware wallets is the most secure option you can find.
Yeah.
Well, relatively, maybe you can go paper wallets, but it's more likely you lose your money with the paper wallet. But the hardware is the most secure option right now. It's impossible to hack remotely. It's just phishing, scamming. But that's human stupidity. That's not
Yeah,
the
and
technology.
Telegram in general, it's in many ways it's such a cancer. I mean, it's also, you know, this privacy based. They respect your privacy, but it also means that there's no way to report. And I mean, I get these reports almost each and every day. Someone trying to be me and sell things. You know, you come on my YouTube channel, pay me a few Bitcoin. But if that happens on Instagram, for example, they're banned instantly. Your report banned. On Telegram, it's not possible. So it's kind of, and it also is the nature of crypto that privacy is extremely valued, and there are many pros, but also cons to keep in mind. So being on Telegram is extremely careful. And I mean, mostly it is the token projects that get scammed all the time by different scammers in different ways. And a very interesting one I saw was that they ask a simple question. For example, there is a token sale going on or something. They ask a very simple question. Then the admin says yes or no. So let's say the admin says yes. Then the scammer can go and modify the original question. And for example, modify it to something like, hey, should we send tokens to this address? And then insert scam address. And then the answer to that is yes. Because, and when people look through that, they don't even realize that it's a scam. So there is really a whole, I've seen several Medium blog posts outlining all the scams that happen on Telegram. And so you really need to be careful there. And it's impossible to do anything about it. And it's very frustrating for everyone, but there is really, really bad support and really bad reporting. It's possible to report, but nothing's going to happen, most likely.
You spoke about the regulations in Canada. I was just wondering what came out. Do you have a general of what came out recently with how they're going to regulate?
I haven't read the regulations that they came out last week. I know that from next year the over-the-counter trades need to be reported if they are over $10,000, and they need to be KYC. However, if they're below 10,000, there's no such requirement.
A few months ago, I also saw this tax forum that went around the internet with like Canadian tax authorities sending out these forms to Bitcoin holders, crypto holders, with like 10, 20 pages. Like you need to answer, do you hold crypto, why, which keys, which, is it, like, was it true? Or do you know anyone?
I don't know. I don't know if it was true, but I read about it. So
Right.
Just remember, if you get a text from the CRA, to tell them whatever they're asking.
yeah, if you get text from the CRA asking you to pay your taxes in Bitcoin, don't.
They even called it. They
I
called
got
it.
that call twice yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a guy talking like looks like from India.
Yeah, there are many IRS scams as well.
Ivan, I have a question for you. So,
Yes.
how did you start? What's your story? I don't know. You have like 1,000 videos. Maybe you already talked about it, but it's already difficult to go
so
through.
I started as a developer, really, and I was interested in technology since I was 9. So I taught myself how to do first web development, HTML, JavaScript, and then it continued with C#, Java, C++. And really, it was my hobby that I did during my spare time. I learned about crypto in 2013. Didn't really enter crypto for real. I just, at that time, I was in high school, so I bought a very small amount. But then everything crashed, and we went into this crypto winter, but I still thought it was very interesting. So I kept up to date. Ethereum came in 2015. And then the whole space became so much more interesting to me as a developer at that time. So I learned Solidity, I started to experiment, but nothing really serious that I did in crypto at that time. And so at that time, I also worked at Ericsson, a big corporation in Sweden, as a developer. And the YouTube channel for me was really a way to show
They bought most of the Nortel Canadian assets.
Nortel, what is it?
Well,
Telecom?
Nortel was like the biggest Canadian telecom.
Right.
Well, they were like Ericsson. They were producing all this, and then they went bankrupt, and Ericsson bought
Right.
most of the IP assets.
Right.
Sorry, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, right now it's mostly it's always been about telecom, but there was this period in time when Ericsson phones were very popular, like Sony Ericsson. But that was before iPhone. But so yeah, and then I started my YouTube channel as a way to kind of show my executives that, hey, I know about crypto, here's all the knowledge, and then maybe somehow it will help me in Ericsson. But then YouTube channel grew way quicker than my career at Ericsson, so I went full-time YouTube in 2017. And it was right before this whole hype happened.
Mhm.
So it was in September, October 2017, and then we saw the rise in Bitcoin and everything. And yeah, since then I do YouTube full time and speak and travel. We do have an online academy that we work on a lot. We have 12K students there that are active. And yeah, so it's I mean, there's so much happening. So there's always something to talk about. I love it. And it's connected to technology, to economy, to politics. Everything is involved in crypto. And everyone who is in crypto learns something about technology, something about even trading, some TA, they know some patterns. So it's very fun to see this development and this journey that people have. Maybe they enter for speculation, then they learn some TA because they want to know is the price going up or down. They learn some technology, then they see, okay, SEC wants to ban, then they learn some regulation. So I think it's good for your worldview, common knowledge.
What I like about it, that more people start asking questions about money.
Yeah, yes.
What money is and what, like they start to think about economics, macroeconomics, central banks.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's the one of the major things that Bitcoin did with humanity, even though it's just on a very low scale. So it's still very beginning, and very few
Yes.
people just are interested, or even maybe a lot of people heard of Bitcoin, but very few people know what Bitcoin is.
Yes, yes, yes.
In general. And well, you produce videos every day,
Yeah.
and it's like 30 minutes to 1 hour long. Like, how long does it take to prepare for this?
Prepare it takes a few hours. I usually prepare the night before, then I wake up, I do the stream. So I do the stream 8 a.m. my time. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but also it's so fun to do. And I'm finished at approximately 8:30 at 9, so I have the whole day in front of me. So it's not like the day is now gone. I can still do so many other things. And then in the evening, I do preparation for the next stream. And I don't know, usually I have 3-4 topics, and it takes 20, 30, sometimes even 40 minutes to talk about it. And then there's the chat, and then there are questions in the chat, and maybe I think about something else to say in connection. So yeah, they become longer and longer, it feels like.
So I just have a question, kind of riffing off what you were saying, Dennis, because we've seen that it gets people to think about money, right? And I just have a
Yes.
question, because Bitcoin being the first cryptocurrency, and yet just because it's a first, in the long run, like, we didn't know Bitcoin was going to be as successful as it has become, right? And we don't really know in the long run what will make for success. We don't even really know what the purpose of some of these technologies is yet, right? But my question for you is just regarding Bitcoin and money, because it was the first, not necessarily the best. But do you think Bitcoin's going to look good in the long run, or at some point will something just come along and obsolete Bitcoin?
I don't think it has to be the best. You look at TCP/IP, for example, it's not the best protocol. You look at Windows operating system, not the best operating system. So I think it's the best known technology that will win. In this case, it is.
It should be good enough.
Yeah, good enough.
Well, I'm
For
just
everyone to
thinking
use.
in terms of things like, because of course environment is a big issue, energy
Yeah,
consumption, electricity generation, right? And of course Bitcoin's proven to be very heavy on that kind of thing. If something were to come along that were to be a little more environmentally friendly,
I don't think that is a good enough reason. And also this environment issue is very debatable as well. Because yes, if you just look at the numbers, it looks big, but then you compare it to, okay, how much does it cost to run all the banks and offices and remittance? How much energy does it take to run casinos, to run Facebook, to run... I mean, there are so many other things we're spending a lot of energy on, and this is money for the world. This is opening up so many opportunities for people all over the world who do not even, they can't even receive transactions from other countries in many cases. And you just realize how much innovation is being killed when it is in that way. Because it doesn't matter if you're next Elon Musk, if you cannot receive money from the outside world, you will not get any investment and you will not get any opportunities.
Like, as a comparison, well, last week I was talking about exactly last week or like 2 weeks ago about the energy consumption. And there was a study, like it's released a couple of weeks ago. So in comparison, the US idle home appliances, idle, not working, they consume so much electricity it can power Bitcoin 5 times over. at current consumption. And also Bitcoin consumes cheap electricity because it's a market force, like it needs to find some sort of an equilibrium. That's why we see a lot of miners in Quebec using the hydroelectric power, because the river is just running, and if they cannot consume electricity, no one's buying because it's too much. So they're willing to sell at the lower prices. Or sometimes they find like the cheap source of electricity, gas, for example, somewhere in a distant place, but there's no grid, so you cannot transport electricity, but you can start producing electricity there and produce Bitcoin. You just exchange.
That's a very good point. I haven't thought about it in that sense, that you don't have to transport electricity. So whenever you find the source, you just install miner there. And
there is a company in Alberta, it's called Upstream, I think. They produce containers that can utilize the gas that's the side effect of oil extraction. And that methane gas is so cheap, they just burn them. So that's why you see like the fire burning at every oil rig. Instead of that, so you can bring this container and you start using the gas energy to produce electricity and to mine Bitcoin. So your return on investment, so your oil rig is much more profitable right now because of that. So, and because you can use electricity in remote places, so it will force the innovation in energy production.
Well, you know, there's a lot of talk about free energy too, right? So, and I really think it is out there somewhere. So I guess that would make that whole issue
Sun
absolutely
in the
moot.
sky. And Andreas Antonopoulos, he suggests that we should just implement the carbon tax. So whoever produces carbon, then that should be taxed. And this way, through the market forces, the miners will shift to energy that doesn't have a carbon footprint.
Although I think Doug Ford squashed that idea, in Ontario anyways.
And we have a question, Avet.
Hey everyone, you are our person, and so I would assume you are targeted for scams or hacks or something like that. Would you mind share the experience if you had one, or you know about something that happened with your friends? Probably again, public person that got targeted by hack attacks. That would be great.
yeah, I mean, scams happen all the time, mostly impersonators. I mean, that is the biggest issue. And it is about Telegram we spoke about, that there's always someone writing that, hey, Ivan, should we do our consultation today or tomorrow? And I have no idea what kind of consultation he's talking about. Also, the scammers, they can send emails that look like they come from my email, because there are websites that can do it for you. It's very easy. And there's really no way, because the email protocol wasn't built for authentication, really. So it happens all the time. But when it comes to hacks and things, I mean, I never speak about my holdings or anything, so that hasn't been an issue. Also, something else that is important is just to talk about the fact that these scams do happen all the time, mainly on Telegram. But I think the most famous one, maybe you've heard about it, is Ian Balinas. But he stored his keys in Evernote, so that was a basic mistake. But I think it's just, you know, common sense is the thing we should talk about. Don't advertise your wealth, and try to talk about Bitcoin, but not your Bitcoin.
Question over there?
When do you see Bitcoin going by the end of the year for Ivan?
The price, or the price?
Yeah.
right. No, it's very fun to discuss. It's very fun to discuss. Well, it's obviously anyone's guess, but when it comes to like the market momentum and everything we've seen, it's been so strong. So I do hope we'll see 17K at least. At least I was really hoping we would see it in July. So maybe I'm too optimistic. But to me, I mean, we should be reaching 20K in early 2020. So if that time schedule really turns out to be true, then 17K is not impossible. But really, I was a bit more optimistic in June. Now I'm not that optimistic in July. But it's anyone guess. I'm obviously just for fun. But something important to realize is that when people talk about 100K for one Bitcoin, it sounds so unreal, because it's 100,000, so big number. But at the same time, you also need to realize it's only 5x from the all-time high. And last time we went 20x. And if we were sitting here in 2016, just 1.5K for one Bitcoin would be incredible. So I think we always overestimate how high it will go in the short term, but underestimate in the long term. So at the end of the day, really, it's anyone guess. But I think 100K in this next bull market, it's quite possible. But yeah, at the end of the year, it's too soon. So therefore, I'm saying it's anyone's guess, really.
But also one thing to keep in mind, the market cap of Bitcoin is very small. So to the degree when a millionaire that wants to just buy some Bitcoin can move the price significantly up or down. And we saw that happened, like someone was selling 5,000 Bitcoin and it dropped like $2,000 in 5 minutes.
True.
It's a very small market, so if someone significantly large decide to come in, they can manipulate it easily. And then because the entire space can consist of the retail people, like normal people, they're not familiar with trading, and they will start like following this
all the bots,
human psychology.
All the technical analysis looks great if somebody starts buying, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But also it's important to think about the end game. How far will Bitcoin go? And this is so difficult to assess right now, and this is why the volatility is so big, because we don't know how much one Bitcoin will be worth. But one number is 8 trillion in market cap. That would be the market cap of gold. So can Bitcoin potentially go to market cap of gold? Well, of course, in my view, we can. In that sense, we would be at 380,000. And when you compare it to gold, it's important also to know that gold is, it's store of value, but it's, for example, difficult to store and to transport. And you have a lot of companies built around gold in order to solve these issues. And you really look at the traditional finance sector as well. You have PayPal, you have MasterCard, Visa. There are so many companies that are just built around the transportation and storage of your money. In Bitcoin, that is all built in. So maybe if we take market cap of gold, plus market cap of all the companies that do everything around it, then we can start comparing.
I don't see the reason why Bitcoin wouldn't replace all the money in the world. It's just, if we go to the market cap of gold, why should we stop there? So if people believe that the fiat money is not the good store of value, and they will start moving to Bitcoin, eventually it will replace everything.
But if I think Bitcoin is good store of value, then I don't want to spend it. Why would I spend it? I better spend fiat. So fiat circulate, we hold Bitcoin.
That's correct, but because you have to eat.
Yes, but if I have the chance to spend the fiat, then I will do that.
I mean, like a hypothetical scenario, you only have Bitcoin right now, and you will have to spend it.
Yeah,
because at least you need to buy food or something like that.
Yes,
so
yes.
You will spend.
But I think it's interesting to think about, will Bitcoin replace fiat or not? And there, I do see a future where Bitcoin and fiat coexist, but the central banks are just, they need to be so careful, because they know that if they really mess up, and they really become too relaxed, or they really start messing with people's money for real when it comes to hyperinflation and being unresponsible with finances, so you need to print money to solve these issues, then people have an alternative that is way easier to use than gold and silver and everything you had in the past, which is Bitcoin. But for now, it seems maybe I'm not visionary enough, but to replace fiat, it's gonna be a long time, especially because I better hold it than spend it, and if I have the chance to spend fiat.
But that's just Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin has proven itself. In fact, it almost had to prove itself as a store of value, right?
Yes.
But some of the other cryptos are coming out trying to be a transactional currency, right?
But why not? But what is the? What is the selling point then? Because why not use fiat in that sense if it's only for transaction? If we're not caring about storing value, and it could be about the power, for example, that wants to take power away from the traditional institutions we have right now.
Well, you mentioned that central banks have to be responsible, but I think they've already proven to be pretty irresponsible.
Right.
When the U.S. government owes $20 trillion.
That's give me 2% cash back on all my purchases. I don't get that with Bitcoin.
Lolly.
Swipe my card, 2%,
Lolly.
nice and easy.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story. So I was buying pizza, and I paid with my credit card. So I increased the money supply of Canada by $50. Can you do this with Bitcoin?
No, you can't. Yeah, but that's not what we're discussing, because if you don't care about the store of value feature of fiat, you only care about transacting, then it's not an issue. So this is my point, that because Bitcoin is so good, people will not want to spend. And there's actually a law in economics. I think it's called Gresham's law.
Yeah.
That bad money really drives out good money from circulation because people just want to hold it.
So you want to get rid of your bad money, but no one wants to accept your bad money.
Right.
That's gonna.
But then as a merchant, so really I'm looking from different sides, but then as a merchant, like I don't care. If I can accept it, I can switch to Bitcoin quickly, then I just want to sell things.
That's-
whatever is easiest.
That's what is happening in Venezuela.
Right.
This is how they work. They want to get rid of the bolivares
As soon as possible.
because every hour you're losing like 10%.
Right.
Yes, we have a question.
I have a question, Ivan,
Yes.
for anyone that can answer. What do you think will happen to Bitcoin in this future where there will be no incentives to mine because all the halving happened and all the Bitcoins are out there? So you as a miner, even if you resolve the puzzle, you won't get the Bitcoins.
Yeah.
That will happen one time. We will be alive, hopefully, if they don't invent the pill. But what do you think will happen to Bitcoin in that time? When there's no more
So
Bitcoin?
right now there is an assumption that mining will just continue forever. And really maybe that is one of the biggest differences between gold and Bitcoin, that when you have mined gold, it's there and it's you can use it and you're not depending on anything in the future. But when you have mined Bitcoin, you're actually dependent on the future mining of the network. And the whole idea with mining is that, you know, miners make money in two ways. One is transaction fees and the other one is block reward. And the whole idea, at least in theory, is that from the beginning, there were no transactions. So when Satoshi started mining, nobody transacted. So at the start of time, the block reward was very high. And then it halves every 4 years. So block reward decreases with time. But the idea is that with time, transactions will increase, so the transaction fees will replace the block reward. So block reward goes down, transaction fees go up, and theoretically they should be enough of an incentive. But the question is, will it happen? I mean, it's 100 years in the future as well. So although it's an interesting question, and you know, maybe transaction fees will be enough, maybe not. We still don't know. We don't even know how Bitcoin will look like at that moment. And it's important to also realize that we have so many other issues in the world when it comes to Bitcoin adoption today that are way more important. Because if nobody uses Bitcoin, this question is irrelevant because it's so far in the future. It's I heard a good comparison to Flintstone. That in the Stone Age, Flintstone was actually a resource that was not reusable. But the Stone Age people, they didn't care because they didn't even know that probably. They just used Flintstone and then they evolved and yeah, now we have all of this technology. So if they at that time would be caring so much about the fact that Flintstone is gonna run out and they're gonna, you know, invent some ways to use less Flintstone, we would never reach the same technological progress. So the same theory I hear many people apply to Bitcoin as well, that, you know, for now, we have so many other issues. Nobody is even using Bitcoin right now, and not many people even understand what it is. So that is the issue number one. Issue number two might be the fact that block reward, when it goes down, miners don't have an incentive. And at that time, probably we will see people pushing for, you know, a hard fork. Maybe we should increase the inflation supply, but, you know, right now, the 21 million number is so strong in Bitcoin that I think it will be extremely difficult. But people will probably try to do it. So we'll have to see.
That's the value proposition actually of Bitcoin.
But yeah, it's also important to note that that value proposition is, people sometimes say that it's based in the code, like it's written in the code, and it is true. But the code is resting on social consensus. So actually, at the end of the day, it's all about social consensus. Because if everyone says, okay, let's increase the supply, it could happen. So it's important to note as well that social consensus is still at the core of it.
Like, I think this is the the value proposition of Bitcoin that the supply is limited and it cannot be changed. If you change the supply, then we create another inflation, and it doesn't really matter what's the technology behind it. But answering your question, I think that the transaction fee is going to be enough to cover. So the Bitcoin block is limited by 1 megabyte. Yeah, 1 megabyte. So it's only about 500,000 transactions a day. And if the entire world is using Bitcoin, so obviously there will be more transactions. Like what's the Visa transactions per day? Millions, or hundreds of millions. Not sure. So only the high value transactions will be allowed on the main chain. Anyway, so it's like central banks, for example, can settle at the end of the day. They can settle Bitcoins between each other. And all the other small transactions will happen on the layer 2, or even layer 2 can be decentralized like Lightning, or centralized like Coinbase, for example. You can transact on Coinbase, send Bitcoin from user to user without registering on chain, so it's free. That's it. But we don't know. We're like it's really far away.
So just a question, since you're here, I mean, what's your just general take on proof of work versus proof of stake?
So proof of work is what has worked and what people really understand, and what really connects a network to the real world in one way. And what I mean by that is that when you, for example, when you mine Bitcoin, the reason you are honest is because you've spent electricity to come up with a block. And if you're trying to cheat the network will reject your block. So you will not get your reward, you will not get transaction fees, so you've just spent a bunch of money and you wasted it. So you're being honest by staking something that is outside the network. So in that sense, we're connecting Bitcoin to something that is more tangible.
Mm-hmm.
In proof of stake, you're actually staking coins that are actually coming from the network itself. So you're not really connecting it to something that is tangible in the same sense. So proof of stake is more game theory. It's more designing a network and the system of incentives that is just within itself. It's not really connected to something outside. So in that sense, I do trust proof of work more, because it's so easy to understand. It's physically impossible to reverse blocks or to change the blocks, because then you have to spend it, you have to mine, you have to guess. It is really backed by math. In proof of stake, it's not really the same backing by math and backing of electricity. But still, you do see proof of stake coins working, but we need to be honest as well and say that in many cases it's more about game theory, and it's way difficult to design, engineer, understand, and really see the different ways it can go wrong. While in Bitcoin it's way more calculatable, and other proof of work coins way more calculatable, and it's just so few moving parts and it's so elegant in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why I think many people like it and many people trust it. While,
What about quantum computing? Do you think that poses a risk to the security of the blockchain?
maybe long term. But for now, it's I think we're just so far away when it comes to quantum computing. And if you do have a quantum computer that is able to crack, for example, the hashing function in Bitcoin, so that you can just print money very quickly because you can create all of these blocks instantly. You don't need to guess because you can do it so quickly, and you don't need to spend electricity for guessing the next block. I guess we will just hard fork to another algorithm, because the technical solution is very easy to do. If we need to change the algorithm, it's not difficult. But that would require coordination, and everyone needs to change it. And so in that sense, maybe it happens, but it's so far away that it's also one of these problems that are tier 2. We have so many other problems right now to solve.
It's like trying to conserve our use of flintstone.
Exactly.
So my comment on the proof of stake. So first of all, with proof of stake, it's possible to attack the network if, let's say, if you're on the country level, if you're the government, you want to attack the network, you just acquire 51% of coins, and nothing can be done. You control the entire network.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, the reach gets richer, because if you control more coins than everyone else, or like not even than everyone else, so you control significant amount of coins, and then you are selected more often to validate the blocks, and you collect all the transactions fee, and with time you will eventually.
But that is actually one of the arguments for proof of stake, because in proof of stake, if you have 10 times more money than I have, then you will have 10 times more chance to get elected. But in proof of work, if you have 10 times more money than I have, then you can probably buy more than 10 times more hash power because of economies of scale. You can do bulk orders, you can really do more efficient operation. So in that sense, I think it's one of the arguments that makes sense more in proof of stake.
But in proof of work, we can bring more money from outside, like the energy, we can add up energy. It's not zero-sum game. So in proof of stake, we need to just buy and sell tokens. And that's the government-based attacks. With proof of work, it's possible, but we always can add more power from outside. With proof of stake, if the government controls the majority, it's done. Plus, in proof of work, you need seriously 51% to attack the network, maybe a little less. Well, in proof of stake, it's something like 5%, if not 1%, to be able to reorganize the entire blockchain. Plus, because there's no proof of work, so blocks are not cryptographically connected with each other, and it's possible in 1 second to do the rework for the entire blockchain. So it's not proven to be secure.
It's more about game theory.
We have another question or comment here.
I think you only need a third of the network to keep the network from moving forward. So a third of it can stop until you don't.
That's going? Yeah, I read, like, it depends on the latency also. It depends on game theory. Miners can add up different strategies, but yeah, it's not 50%. Like sometimes it's even 20 will work.
And no one's cracked it yet, so.
Okay.
Oh, I just wanted to say another weakness of proof of work is that it's kind of like all the chains are all doing proof of work and adding to the same pool, because if you're not able to run like a weak chain, so just get attacked. So all the miners who are switching between chains are always constantly attacking the weakest chain. It's kind of brutal in that sense. And that means that although you said it's easier to maintain proof of work like consensus-wise, that doesn't mean it's easier to run a proof of work blockchain. It's actually, I'd say, a lot more difficult.
So how do you mean run? In what sense?
Like start one, like create one. And
Right.
Yeah,
From
sure.
the
I mean,
beginning,
it's
yeah.
physical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
And
So that is more difficult, of course. But I think, generally it's all about, at least when we discuss proof of work and proof of stake, the way I see it is, okay, we do have established blockchains, because that is what is the most interesting. You have Bitcoin and Litecoin, and then you have proof of stake chains that are also established. You compare those two, which one it is. And long term, I think we will have both, because it's maybe we'll have one proof of work chain that everyone uses for the best security. Then you have proof of stake with some benefits, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive either. But for example, many people speculate, will Bitcoin ever switch from proof of work? That one, in my view, is very difficult. Maybe it's impossible to see, at least in the way I see it.
Did we have more questions over here? There's one. Uh-oh.
Going back to your point that proof of work is more rooted, I guess, in reality, due to the nature of needing electricity, and a lot of that is, you have skin in the game because you have to buy that electricity. How do you see that as different than, for example, in proof of stake, where you have to spend fiat to buy those tokens? Does that not give it a similar rooting in reality as proof of work?
Well, not really, because electricity is actually needed to construct the block itself. You're using electricity to guess, you're using electricity to fuse blocks together. So I'm really talking about the fact that this fusing of blocks is tied to reality. But yes, you do need fiat to buy coins, but you don't really need anything from the outside world to create new blocks once you already have the coins. So this is what I mean, the fact that the actual data structure that is the blockchain, it needs electricity to form and to continue to grow.
Yeah. Electricity is real, but fiat currency isn't. We know that. I'm just curious, we're talking about blockchains, but now there's new kinds of things. like
Tangle.
Tangle, Hashgraph, and that kind? I mean, do you see anything coming up that you're really excited about?
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. For now, I mean, Tangle has been very popular for two years now. People are so excited, and up until just a few months ago, they had a coordinator. I mean, specifically IOTA. They had this coordinator, which was a central part. Now you see development where they have apparently figured out a way to remove it, but we'll see. I mean, for now, it's still so early on, so we don't really have anything concrete. But from a technological standpoint, I'm always interested to see other ways to reach consensus. But you look at Hashgraph, you can't even compare it to Bitcoin. There, it is really a centralized network in many cases. You need permission to be part of it, and yeah, it's totally different worlds. But long term, maybe we'll have other data structures and other ways to reach consensus better.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else got any questions or comments? Okay, we got one more over here. Jerry? We're getting a mic to Jerry.
Thanks. So my question is, so Vitalik recently mentioned in the shift to ETH 2.0 on potentially using Bitcoin Cash as a data layer. What kind of potentials do you see with that, and not just Bitcoin Cash, but just using other blockchains or other mechanisms for the data storage, and then have the logic being stored on Ethereum or Ethereum 2.0 or something?
Right. So what he was talking about is this is something that got a lot of attention last week. That Vitalik created this blog post where he talked about the fact that Ethereum is going to be integrated with Bitcoin Cash for storage. And so what he mostly talked about there is layer 2 solutions. And if you want to do layer 2, I mean, really, layer 2 is a lot about scalability, and it has two dimensions to it. One dimension is logic, and the other is data. So, for example, in Lightning Network, you need to solve both. You need to figure out a way to store these transactions that we do off-chain, and you need to figure out to store them in a way that still makes sense. What happens, for example, if I lose a transaction in this channel that we have, can I still get my funds on the main blockchain? So these protocols right now need to handle both logic and data, and it becomes very complicated. So Vitalik was basically thinking, and the same is for Ethereum right now with Plasma. Plasma also needs to do logic and data. So he was proposing, hey, maybe we can store data on Bitcoin Cash. So if you build a layer 2 solution on Ethereum, you could try to use Bitcoin Cash as a data solution, and then you only need to care about logic. And then he proposed some way that it can be done. So he also linked a protocol that can verify, that can get Bitcoin block headers into an Ethereum smart contract. So you can verify the data you have on Bitcoin Cash. But it's not really something, in my view, that Ethereum Foundation will do. It's just a proposal that, hey, you know what? This is a way we can do layer 2 solutions where the layer 2 solution doesn't need to care about data because we use another blockchain. And he proposed Bitcoin Cash. And I think it got so much attention because he chose Bitcoin Cash, and so many people, Bcash, this and that, so it really blew up. But it's, in my view, it's not like they're gonna, like Vitalik is gonna implement something. In my view, it's just a thought that he had, hey, layer 2 solution, data on Bitcoin Cash, logic in layer 2. So we'll see. And Vitalik doesn't need to implement anything. Someone else could come along and implement his idea. And it's not something that needs to be done on the main layer in Ethereum. You don't need to change anything. Anyone can start building a layer 2 solution, and in this fashion he described.
Okay, anybody else? Oh.
You guys familiar with asteroid mining? And when that's going to do the price of gold?
Right.
I
Wait, I
think
thought
that's
space didn't exist.
I think that's not true. I don't think the asteroids have gold in them.
But
In those quantities. Well, who knows? How do they know? The gold is very difficult to produce in the universe in general.
Plus, the Earth is flat. There's no such thing as space. Okay, anybody else? Okay, because if there isn't, then we'll just get to the informal part. I don't know if there's more pizza, but we can all just come and chat with Ivan.
Yes.
And we should,
Next week, Blockstack Meetup's gonna be here. Whoever is late, 7 p.m. July 30th. We'll have guys from Blockstack, and we will have the video call with them. So.
great. And of course, people can Google Ivan on Tech, but what is the actual YouTube channel if people want to?
Ivan Tech.
Ivan on Tech.
Yes.
That's easy.
Yes, yes.
Okay, Ivan, thanks. It's been great
Thank
to
you
have you
much.
here. Okay, thanks. Okay, we're going informal. We're going to turn the cameras off and get to know each other a little better. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. Yay.
Very good.